Let's talk about a man so competent that emperors resented him, warlords watched him, and historians spent centuries trying to downplay what he actually did. Sima Yi wasn't just a bureaucrat. He wasn't just a general. He wasn't just a regent. He was the man who outlasted Zhuge Liang, executed a bloodless coup, and built the architecture of a future dynasty without ever taking the throne. So why does imperial tradition consistently portray him as dangerous? Why do Confucian historians bury praise under criticism? And why does his name still feel like a cautionary tale? The answer is simple. He made emperors feel irrelevant. Sima Yi was born in 179 CE during the waning years of the Han Dynasty. This was not a period of gentle decline. It was complete institutional collapse. Central authority was fracturing, warlords had begun carving up the empire, and the court in the Luoyang had become an empty shell. Sima Yi entered this chaos with no military command, no independent wealth, and no faction backing him. What he had was strategic intelligence and a long game. He was eventually recruited by the most powerful figure of the time, Cao Cao, the warlord who effectively ran the imperial government from behind the throne. Even at the time, this was a controversial appointment. Cao Cao was known for testing his subordinates for loyalty and ambition. Sima Yi passed those tests, but only barely. Cao Cao once said that Sima Yi has the look of a wolf. If he rises, he will not submit to others. That wasn't a compliment. That was a red flag. Still, Sima Yi was retained, and while Cao Cao remained alive, Sima Yi did what he was supposed to do. He kept a low profile, produced results, and avoided conflict. But from the beginning, everyone around him understood the stakes. He wasn't just there to serve. He was there to outlast. When Cao Cao died in 220 CE, his son Cao Pi took over, formally ending the Han Dynasty and proclaiming the state of Wei. Sima Yi now operated under a new regime, one that owed its very existence to a coup. Cao Pi valued loyalty and competence. He didn't like people who looked too ambitious. But Sima Yi had already figured out the key to survival. Never be the loudest voice in the room, but always be the one who writes the minutes afterward. Sima Yi was not immediately given supreme power, but over time, he was handed increasingly sensitive assignments, military campaigns, governance of key provinces, and eventually the co-regency of the empire. Under Cao Pi and later Cao Rui, Sima Yi rose steadily through the ranks. Every mission was successful. Every assignment was handled with precision. He showed discipline, caution, and a mastery of logistics that outclassed most of his peers. But here's the problem. Competence in an imperial bureaucracy does not necessarily build trust. In fact, it often has the opposite effect. Both Cao Pi and Cao Rui respected Sima Yi. Neither fully trusted him, because every successful operation made it clearer this was a man who didn't need the emperor to function. The emperor needed him. For most of Chinese historical memory, Sima Yi is the other side of the Zhuge Liang equation. Zhuge Liang was the chancellor of Shu Han, a rival state. He was known for reforms, innovations, and relentless northern campaigns designed to break through the Wei defenses and restore the Han dynasty. Sima Yi was assigned to stop him. These two never met in direct combat in the traditional sense. What they engaged in was more like chess with live pieces. Zhuge Liang launched repeated invasions into Wei territory. Sima Yi blocked them, outmaneuvered them, and ultimately wore down the logistical strength of Shu Han. Sima Yi refused to take the bait. He refused to overextend. He prioritized attrition over victory. When Zhuge Liang died in 334 CE during one of these campaigns, Sima Yi didn't launch a triumph. He didn't gloat. He simply resumed normal operations. That restraint, that ability to focus on the long-term outcome instead of immediate glory, was part of what made him so dangerous. Zhuge Liang is remembered as a genius. Sima Yi is remembered as the man who beat him, by doing nothing that looked impressive in the moment, but everything that mattered in the end. The real turning point came after the death of Cao Rui. The throne passed to a child, Cao Feng, who was too young to rule on his own. The government appointed two regents, Sima Yi and a rival, Cao Shuang. This was a delicate situation. On paper, they were equals. In practice, Cao Shuang held most of the authority. He marginalized Sima Yi, exiled his allies, and assumed Sima Yi was politically finished. Sima Yi did not protest. He claimed illness. He retired from public life. He even faked symptoms of senility, limping around with a cane and pretending not to remember basic details. Cao Shuang believed it. In 249 CE, when Cao Shuang and his faction left the capital to accompany the young emperor on a ceremonial visit to the imperial tombs, Sima Yi made his move. He locked down the capital, secured control of the military, published an edict accusing Cao Shuang of corruption, and invited him to surrender. Cao Shuang believed the offer of leniency and complied. Sima Yi then ordered the execution of Cao Shuang and his entire extended family. This was not just a political maneuver. It was a complete reset of the regime's power structure. From this point forward, Sima Yi controlled the imperial government. He didn't take the throne, he didn't declare himself emperor, but he no longer needed permission to act. After the coup, Sima Yi operated as regent in all but name. He controlled military appointments, fiscal policy, court promotions, and internal security. The emperor existed, but decisions did not flow from him. This is where the hatred begins, not from the people he executed, but from the political legacy of the imperial system itself. Sima Yi's success broke the unwritten rules. In Confucian tradition, ministers were supposed to be loyal unto death, even when their emperors were incompetent. They were supposed to advise, obey, and step aside. They were not supposed to remove emperors' confidants and rule behind the curtain. Sima Yi reversed that expectation. He showed that a competent bureaucrat willing to wait could take over everything, without civil war, without rebellion, without ever declaring his own dynasty. His sons would take that final step. Sima Shi and Sima Zhao continued their father's system, and eventually his grandson Sima Yan would dissolve the Wei dynasty and found the Jin. Sima Yi never held the title of emperor, but every document produced by the Jin court was built on his framework. The strange thing about Sima Yi is how negative the commentary became, long after his death. During the Tang dynasty, Emperor Taizong ordered his historians to revisit the Sima family legacy. They painted Sima Yi as a cunning manipulator, a disloyal minister, and a threat to imperial stability. One quote from that period summarized the official position. He waited until the emperor was outside the capital, raised troops from within, and executed the loyal. The dust on the grave was still fresh, yet he launched a massacre. This is not the conduct of a virtuous minister. This was not just an opinion, it was an institutional judgment meant to serve as a warning to future officials. Do not be this man. Why? Because Sima Yi proved that a powerful bureaucrat, left unchecked, could dismantle imperial authority from the inside without firing a shot. From a strategic standpoint, this was exactly the problem. Sima Yi followed all the rules until he didn't need to. And once he had enough control, he rewrote the system to favor long-term administrative dominance rather than personal charisma or hereditary legitimacy. What does Sima Yi actually reveal about the Chinese imperial system? First, that it rewards competence right up to the point that competence threatens the throne. Second, that when the ruling family lacks military experience or administrative capacity, it often hands power to regents, generals, or ministers by necessity. Once that power transfer occurs, the system has no built-in mechanism to take it back without violence. Sima Yi thrived in that environment. He exploited the ambiguity between authority and responsibility. He understood that as long as he maintained formal respect for the emperor, he could exercise real power without crossing a visible line. And when the time came to act, he acted fast, cleanly, and without hesitation. Sima Yi died in 251 CE. By then he had outlived his enemies, removed rival factions, and centralized control of the Wei state in his own family. His sons continued the policy. His grandson rebranded the empire. But none of them matched the precision with which Sima Yi executed his strategies. He didn't seek glory. He didn't need adulation. He focused on results. That's what made him a threat. Sima Yi didn't rise by charisma. He didn't win battles with shock and awe. He outlasted, outmaneuvered, and out-administered every player in the game. He showed the limits of imperial control. He proved that loyalty can be strategic and temporary. And he made emperors realize that they were often less important than the people keeping the system functional.